like a reunion for you in many ways, and a lot of friends in the room, but we're grateful for you being here as a contract through FSBA to provide some information for us. As everyone knows, our superintendent announced her retirement at the end of her current contract term, and so we're starting the process now of understanding what a superintendent search process should look like for the Osceola School Board. We are missing Mr. Thacker. Will be joining us, I'm sure, shortly. And other than that, I just want to welcome everybody here from staff and others from the community. We're glad that you're here to listen in on this important process. So, Bill, I'll actually turn to you at this time, and I'd like to provide some overview to the board and take this where you'd like.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Weishire. First, I'm very honored to be able to present some information, just generic information on the superintendent search process through the Florida School Board Association. And I'm certainly very happy to be back here in Osceola County. This is where I started my career, and I've had many wonderful opportunities here. And I've always been following the progress of Osceola County. And I thought, leading up to what I'm going to say, I thought I would just commend the board and the superintendent and the teachers and the leadership team here for some amazing successes over the last few years. I mean, when you look at the FCAT results, your district is one of the few in the state that improved in all the FCAT areas. That is remarkable. No schools in the bottom 300. It used to be the bottom 100. Now they expanded the bottom 300. I work with a lot of school districts, and all of those districts have schools in that, and that is really a credit. Also, your graduation rate staying above the state average. It seemed like every year that there was a new graduation rate calculation put in, and Osceola is above that, and that's not easy with the criteria for that right now. And then when I look what you are doing in terms of career academies, the list of career academies here I think is probably exemplary statewide, and you're leveraging your close proximity to the medical city. I think with the STEM grants that you've been able to achieve, working with the county and Disney and others, that is really a plus. You're also not just focusing on the career academies, expanding academics to provide kids with IB opportunities all through the grade levels. And so when you look at the district from perspective that I have right now, it's absolutely, the progress you're making is absolutely amazing. As far as the leadership of your superintendent, she's recognized statewide as a literacy leader. I know she's been received an award for that. Also, the biliteracy recognition that you have, your programs for students that are learning English are exemplary statewide. And I know in the district I was in, we would often look to you for leadership in that area. Logistics, class size, there are still districts out there that are not making class size, and to make that every year, I mean, it's a real balancing act in a growth district. It's kind of amazing that you all are able to still maintain that and growing. I mean, I was amazed that you're up to 59,000 students. Not all districts are growing like you all, and without any additional millage, you're able to, I know it's tough every year. If you don't have any additional millage, it's hard to get that budget balanced every year, but you're doing that. You're staying above the state minimums right there. But I think also what I've noticed over the last 3 years, because I follow a lot of the districts, is that there is harmony in the district, and there is a stability in this district. And the reason I'm saying all this to lead into this presentation is when you advertise for a superintendent, this will be, I believe, one of the most desirable superintendent positions to apply for in the entire state because of what I just said. You've got that stability right now, and so you also have a wonderful opportunity. Some school boards are forced to make a decision literally overnight when a superintendent leaves. I commend Ms. Luciano for giving this board a year's notice, because what you'll be able to do during this time is be very strategic on your search. And you will be able to, and the goal I know is to, just like a relay race, hand off a baton in June and have a new superintendent take over and build on the momentum which you have right now. So I wanted to lead in on that. And In starting, and I've given you all a handout in advance, and Dana's going to be working the PowerPoint for the audience, and there's other copies there. But I think when you're starting a search, the initial considerations are first very important. The board has to come together to determine, to be together on before the search even starts. And so what I recommend in a situation like this is that you actually have an exit interview with the superintendent. After the school year ends in July, where the superintendent outlines to the board, this is what we're going to accomplish this year, this is what needs to happen, and this is long-term what we need to look at. What that does is it helps the board determine exactly what direction we want to go and where we want to go. One thing that's also very good is to talk about the protocols you have in place right now and protocols that you like and you don't like. For example, if we get a parent complaint, what's the process that we use? Do we like it or we don't like it or anything like that? Because that's something that's important when you're talking with a new superintendent. There are some superintendents that have very strict guidelines about communications and things like that. This exit interview with the board and the superintendent is very productive, and I always recommend it as the first step. FSBA, through your membership, can facilitate this, and it's a very good first step. Whether you use FSBA to do the search or not, they can do a workshop like that. Next process, once you determine that, is you need to talk about how you're going to select the superintendent. And there are actually 3 ways that you can do it. You can do an internal search, and some school districts do an internal search and have their HR people do it. The board can directly appoint a superintendent if they would like, and that does happen in some cases. Or you can conduct a national search, a state or national search using a search firm. And I've provided a list of search firms that Palm Beach County sent bids to, and also Volusia County. So to Mr. Weishire. So that is, if the board decides to go that route, they can do that.
Were there fees with it also?
The fees.
Clarence, let me see what Clarence
Sure.
is.
Okay.
Clarence. Hey.
You can continue.
Right.
I was going to get to that later on, but the fees for the search, there's been several searches in Florida, so I've got some pretty recent information. Run anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000, depending on the services and the extent of services you want the firm to provide, and plus expenses on top of that.
Could you speak a little bit to what FSBA charges in that capacity?
Well, again, it's FSBA is now moving to a all-inclusive search process, which I will go through, and then
Okay.
and in previously, what FSBA would do is advertise and bring candidates to the table, and then that would be the extent of their role. So what FSBA now is advocating is a more all-inclusive process. But what I will say is this: the amount of money you spend is small, because this is compared to making sure that you have the person to follow Melba to continue the momentum which you have in this district right now. Hello.
Mr. Thacker.
Hey, Mr. Thacker. Let's see.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second.
Sure.
Because when I spoke with Wayne, he was telling me it was like $750 a day plus expenses. And I thought it'd be 10 days. That was a conversation. Now I don't know if something's changed or there's.
Okay. I have not talked to Mr. Blanton. That is what the process that was used in the past was to go ahead and post the positions, turn the applications in, and then the board takes it from there. But and when I go through this, you can kind of decide there's a menu of options depending on what you want. If you just want that service, then it will be far less. I mean, because you're right. If you just would like the search consultant to go ahead and post the advertisement online and do a couple of workshops with the board, and then it could be far less. But the investment that you make in the process leading up to the search, and once the superintendent is selected, is what is going to provide the long-term stability for this board. And I'll go through this, and we can talk about the cost a little bit later on. So if you have the exit interview, then the board pretty much knows, well, this is what protocols I like under Ms. Luciano, here's what the goals are, here's the direction. You know, maybe, for example, a goal is to go ahead and really continue the partnership with the medical city. Okay, then you're going to want somebody that is going to be out there in the community. They're going to have their backgrounds are going to be, well, I've had these partnerships with businesses, you know, and I worked up in the research triangle or something like that. This will help the board decide what criteria they want in the next person. You know, we have a large ESOL population here. Maybe we want to have someone who is a leader in continuing the ESOL programs that you have right now. You certainly would want to have someone that understands the ESOL programs, because you have exemplary programs now. You don't want them to go downhill. That's an example right there. So then what happens is, if you have the exit interview, and then we'd have an initial workshop with the board to identify the priorities. And the board, it's very important, the pre-work that the board does is actually one of the most important parts of the process, because if the board is not together, then it's going to be very confusing to the applicants, and then it's going to be hard for you to make a selection. But once you agree on what you want in the candidate and what your goals are, then the process will go smooth. And I always believe this, and I don't mind giving my opinion. It's not about someone coming in trying to sell you to hire me, and I'm going to bring this program or this new innovation to Osceola County. You know as a board what your constituents expect. You as a board know what your priorities are. So it's up to the superintendent to come in and for you to say, I want this accomplished. These are my expectations as a board. So that's what this first workshop would be under phase 2. Okay. Under phase 3, and this is a very critical part of it, the extent of community input. And one thing is there's exciting about hiring a new leader. It's exciting for the community, and it's a really neat opportunity to kind of regroup, to refocus and say, here's where we are right now. We've made a lot of progress, but here's where we're going. So community involvement is something I advocate. There are 3 ways that I've seen to involve the community, and all 3 ways have been well accepted by the communities. And I've been actually on a citizens advisory committee as a citizen in a district, so I've been from that perspective. In Manatee County.
Oh, okay.
I was on the citizens advisory committee there, and I eventually played a different role, but I started out in that role. But the first role is this. When you decide the criteria for the superintendent and the priorities, you can convene a citizens advisory committee and the board members usually select a couple people. You have people represented in the business community in different groups. Okay. And then that is pretty much their role, okay?
I've got a question on
sure.
that one. I followed everything you said in number 2, really,
Okay.
the board figuring out what we want.
Right.
I guess the piece that I've kind of been thinking about is, how do we decide? I mean, I think we can do that. We
Right.
can figure out what we want. Once you get another group of people and we try and tell them what we want, you kind of just once removed what we want to another group that's got to make an interpretation. How do you control that?
Okay. Well,
Do you follow what I'm asking?
I think, and that, yes. And
We don't want a citizen group that all of a sudden determines they want something else, I
well,
guess.
see, that's a good point. And I think one thing I think you also point up is very good is the board is the decision maker on hiring the superintendent. Input is good, but the board has to be the final decision maker. So there's ways of dealing with that. It's by the first way is having listening to the community, deciding what they feel is important, and that's just in that role. And then that information is facilitated. It can be by an outside person or an inside person, whoever, and that's one way to do it. And then that's the end of their involvement. We've involved the community, and in some places they do that, and that works out fine. The second way to do it is a very in-depth way, where the community advisory group does work on the criteria, but then they also review the applications as they come in. They actually narrow down the finalists and make a recommendation to the, through the search consultant on who the board interviews and everything like that. And that's a very in-depth way of doing it. The third way, which I found out to be a very successful, and we use this in St. Lucie County. The Citizens Committee first met and talked about the criteria for superintendent and what their priorities were. And I think the priorities of this community and citizens are going to be probably pretty similar to what the board is, but I don't know that for sure. Then what happened is that their work was over at that point. But then the search consultant narrowed down the finalists. The board said we want to hear about the top 5. Brought the top 5 to the board. The board could add or subtract from that 5 because the board has all the applications. And then when the applicants came in, we had a round robin where we brought back that same Citizens Committee. We brought back the Teachers Association and the other professional organizations, the administrators, and we had another business group. And we had a round robin where each candidate went to all of those people and talked with them. And then everybody who was in that process filled out a form. The strengths and the challenges of every one of the candidates. We tallied all those and gave them to the board. And so the board had input from all of those different groups, and then the board made their decision. And that way I found is a good balance. But we can tailor any of that to a process, yes.
Talk about option 4.
Okay.
Those districts that didn't do the community involvement. What experience can you share with us about districts that did not do this phase 3? What outcomes have they had? If you can just kind of boil it down a little bit for this purpose.
Yeah.
Let me just address it for a second. And I just, because I've been through a couple of these different scenarios. When Dr. Grego, let's go back to 2000, when he got hired, we didn't have any citizens committees. The board, and Suzanne, you were still here, but the board, we did it with Dr. Blanton. We took the resumes, came in, et cetera, and we looked through them with Dr. Blanton's guides. We all, as board members, I want to say there was, I don't know, 40 candidates maybe, something like that. Okay, 40 candidates, and we were all tasked with coming up with our top 4, 5, 6. I think I had 6 finalists. I think the other ones had 4, some had 5. And then Dr. Blanton, because he's got institutional knowledge before the earth cooled, he brought, he gave his insights. So between the board and with his coaching, we came up with a top 5. Now in that process, one of them I think dropped out because he became a finalist in some other district in another state, so we were left I think with 4 at that point. So he coached us through that, and then your predecessors when we did when Dr.
So
Gray.
Jay, if I may interrupt. So the one time that we've undertaken
there
this
was
process
citizens committee also.
without it, and it worked well because the district went ahead and hired Dr. Michael Grego.
And then there was a citizens committee.
I think a
another
lot of
time.
people.
That
But
went
what I wanted to hear.
sideways, didn't it?
That went very sideways. And the point I want to make is I think that, I can't speak for all of you, and we need to hear more, I realize, from Dr. Vogel.
But
I think that our roles are to make this decision, and I've got no appetite to bring in another group
To summarize a little bit, Jay, so that I understood, is that with this district, recently, we've tried both methods. Without doing the citizen involvement, as described here, because I still think that there is citizen involvement. However, I'll talk
They'll
about
contact
Right.
you.
where the district was able to hire a very capable superintendent. And subsequent to that, there was a citizen involvement that didn't work quite well. But to you, Dr. Vogel, what I would ask is, can you give us another example from a different district where there was no phase 3?
Yes.
Thank you.
Recently, 2 school districts Actually, one that I know from the board just hired their interim superintendent. They just, they didn't take any citizens'
Volusia.
input, they didn't, Volusia, right, they just said, we're gonna hire, in another district.
That's similar to what we do.
Right.
But
right.
that's,
Same
but that,
process.
but sir, that's recent. I would like an example of where this happened and we've already known the outcome. Maybe a district that maybe in 2011, 2010 have done it, and can you give us an update as to how that was taken and how that worked out?
I can't give you an example of that because to be honest with you, I'm not aware of boards that have made the selection without some form of input from the community. And it could be as easy as, after this meeting, you're gonna start getting a lot of input. There could be something posted, online,
No,
saying-
and I understand.
Right,
I'm sorry
right.
to interrupt.
No, it's, no.
Because I'm
Right.
trying to get some information here.
Right.
I understand that, you see, our function is to be that community involvement. I mean, that is one of the essence of why we're elected to do this position. And it's up to the individual board member and how they execute that duty to get the involvement and what the community is seeking in terms of input and how they want to be involved with this process. What I mean is the way that you're structuring this with these three choices. In other words, that's very structured. You're suggesting here certain, steps that are pretty much lined out. As far as involvement is always involvement. I don't want to discuss about that philosophy. What I want to know is if there was a school district, recently that was able to go ahead and do it without this phase 3, and what can you tell me of that outcome? It's really short and easy.
Yeah. I'm not aware of any, except those that have hired an interim superintendent.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any of those that have.
Would the round robin, the option 3, would that kind of neutralize I think with the problems that we discussed happened here with the last citizen? I think Clarence brought it up. Is that?
I have found that. I have found that really, eliminated that issue that you're talking about. Because I know exactly what you're talking about as being a member of a citizens advisory committee. And continually had to remind the committee that the board has a final decision. And I think you bring up a good point. You have, because you're elected by the citizens, you may want to, you will have your own way of getting input from the community. So that's an option. You don't have to have, it's not a requirement that you have community involvement, because you will, like you say, you're gonna have it anyway.
I'm talking about this, the
Yeah.
structure as you described is
Right.
not required.
Right,
We're gonna
absolutely.
have it anyways.
You're right.
So it would work, let me just get this straight, see if you agree with this. It would work like, say we all say, well, we're gonna pick maybe a community leader and a teacher from our district.
Right.
We're all each person's gonna pick 2 people or something like that. Would that fit this option 3?
Sure.
And they'd each have a form. You understand what I'm saying?
It would depend on to what extent we would engage those individuals in the process.
I want to tell you something I think is extremely important, and I have it down later here. You have to have somebody that's with you the entire time through this process, because this is operated within the Sunshine Law. And if you use citizen committees, the first thing I always tell these committees is they're operating under the Florida Sunshine Law. And so somebody has to be there that will say, if they start coming up with questions that are illegal or could be a problem, or the conversation gets to a point where that is. So that's something you have to be very careful about.
We have to send the attorney with them.
Well,
But
or
you-
somebody that.
But you were talking more about a form-based,
Right.
which kind of would work out as end up being some sort of a recommendation. You tally scores or
That's
something
right.
like that.
That worked out extremely well in St. Lucie. And what I suggest you doing is calling St. Lucie County Schools and ask them how that worked.
Okay.
Because what happened is, everybody had input, and everybody turned a form in, but the committee didn't rank, they didn't narrow the field, they didn't have any of that, because the board said that's our responsibility. And the St. Lucie model worked extremely well.
How long ago was that?
Pardon?
How long ago was that?
That was 2 months ago.
Okay.
Superintendent starts in January. It's superintendent, that starts July 1.
Is it Wayne Jett?
Wayne Jett, right. He was hired from Palm Beach. And the number 2 candidate there, by the way, Dr. Diana Green, and they were neck and neck. The board was very happy with that search. She was just hired as the interim superintendent for a year in Manatee County. So it was a very strong search.
So Rick Nelson's gone.
Yeah.
Can we use any of their, I mean, because that's all public record, all the resumes they
Yeah.
got in Brevard and Manatee and St. Lucie, can we pull from any of that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Save
Oh,
effort?
I just want to, and you bring up a good point. One of the things that I did, the last 2 superintendent searches we did, and this is going to sound almost, almost elementary, is I went on Google and I just typed in superintendent finalists. And from all over the country, you're getting all of these school districts from Salinas, Kansas, San Jose, California, all over. You're just getting a list, and you start dialing, start calling these
Yeah.
people.
I will say this, FSBA has a national network of superintendents. And I work for FSBA, but I also have worked for a national search firm, Jim Hughey and Associates, with recent searches. The candidate, you will have, I can tell you, and I've screened all the candidates, I can tell you will have a top flight field. Well, FSBA knows how to bring the top candidates here. Mr. Wheeler will solicit candidates, or any board member can do that and bring anybody to it. And one thing that I think is that I like what you said, I think this works better, is the consultant brings candidates when they're all in, and the board looks at all of them, and they can add or subtract, and then the consultant works together with the board to determine who are the finalists. I think that system works out pretty well.
Because I've been through this. I mean, both times when I've been through this, I mean, you'll get, again, 20, 30, 40 resumes. I mean, literally, I called probably in both times at least 15, one of the times, 25 plus. Just get to know, talk to them about, a number of different things, because it's a big decision, it's a big job. So there's a lot of due diligence, a lot of time, and I think any good candidate is going to expect, if they're really going to be considered, they expect multiple phone calls from board members.
Yeah. And for example, Brevard just narrowed their field. They had 106 applicants, and it sounds like a lot, but they narrowed the field very quickly down to 11 or 12, and they just recently used the process to end up with 6 that they're going to go ahead and interview. So, and they've got a good field. So, we have all that access to all that information.
Who narrowed that? Would it have been some sort of citizen advisory committee, the consultant
Brevard didn't
agency?
do that. No, the consultant brought his list, and then the board, and they used a system to determine what the finalists were. A numbering
like
system.
a weighing system?
They used a numbering system.
Okay.
And that's an option, but when you get to that point, I would have my own advice on systems like that. There's some there's always, everything, there's a good and a not so good with it. That's the only thing I'll say about that system. But they ended up with their top people, and now they're going to go ahead and do their interview process. So once we determine the involvement, the citizens' involvement in that process, then the next is to develop the recruitment materials and the application procedures and the advertising plan. And doing this presentation here today really excites me. And I try to, because there are so many positives that you will have on your brochure that you will be flooded with applicants. I will tell you that right now. You will have the top people who would like to succeed Melba and work with you all as a board. Because nobody in this country has the proximity to the medical city. Disney itself is a draw. So, and I know we would work with your, or if FSBA or whoever we do, with your PR department. Your materials that you put out now normally are exemplary anyway. So I think you'd have a top flight brochure. Most of the advertising now is done online. Through Ed Week online, we would put it in the Ed Week. We also have had experience working with non-traditional candidates, if the board is interested in non-traditional candidates, we probably will have some apply anyway, meaning some that might have a background outside of education.
For instance, Duval County had a general.
They had a general. Mr. Mills in Manatee County was a retired military major.
Who's in Pasco?
Kurt Browning.
Browning.
Elected.
And he's elected superintendent. And in fact, I
thought he
work
was
with Kurt. He was the former Secretary of State, and he was the supervisor of elections. I work with Pasco and I work with Kurt. He's doing a phenomenal job.
You just said something I've kind of been thinking about on the desirability of Osceola County for applicants. Any, or do you have any negatives we should be concerned with on how we either hit them head on? Is there anything that people are going to go, I'm not going there because 192 is too crowded?
I think that before
You just said it.
That's right. I mean, I don't.
Only on the east side.
Yeah.
before you came in, I talked about why this district would be so desirable, and I ended up with saying because of the harmony and the stability that's been created over the last few years.
Okay.
And then leading into that, the board needs to be able to spend the pre-time, even before you hire a search firm, coming together as a board to determine exactly what they want.
Who helps facilitate that? Would that be something?
FSBA, I can work with that. What I said, FSBA does a phenomenal workshop on doing an exit interview, and then they could also do a workshop, whether you use FSBA for the search or something, on bringing the board together on what their priorities are. If candidates come in and they see a kind of a split board on the priorities, we know everybody has a different opinion, they're going to say, well, I'm not sure if this is for me. And then the board has to, because again, going back to what I said, I don't want to be repetitious, but it's not what kind of sales pitch I bring to you to hire me as superintendent. It's what you 5 people who are elected by the voters expect of this particular person. I know what Mr. Wheeler's, one of his priorities are. So, but they need to come together with that. And once that person sees that the board is together, and then you'll be able to really move forward on it.
And to the point Dr. Baldwin just made, I'm going to go back to Dr. Grego. When we narrowed it down to 2 finalists, it was Dr. Grego and a guy named Alberto Carvalho, who's now the superintendent in Dade County. And both exceptional candidates, exceptional. But they each had different strengths, and the board, and which is not a criticism on either one of them. But Mr. Carvalho, brought things that were very attractive. Dr. Grego brought things that were very attractive, and you get down to a point where it's almost like, not to use an overused analogy, but it's Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. It really comes down to that, and we made the choice that I think was right for us, which again, Mr. Carvalho clearly was a top-flight candidate. That's why he's in Dade County being successful and flourishing there and doing a great job. But you get down to that point where it's, you got that kind of decision where you've got 2 superstars, and it's like, Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson. That's a good position to be in.
Yeah, it is, and that's what I believe is going to happen next. Phase 5.
Well, can I ask one more question? I'm very much in favor of having anybody from around this country be able to apply for this position, but I've had some people in your organization and around talk about Florida having a unique quality, a unique set of standards and rules. Could you speak to that a little bit about Florida experience or?
Yeah. Florida is also very unique in the whole finance and budgeting aspect. And I think that's when superintendents come from outside of Florida and they don't have any experience in Florida, that's a real challenge for them. Because the first thing they say is, I can't believe this is all the money that we have. I mean, the budgets are very, dollars per student in Florida are less than, I think, 49 other states. Anyway, I want to get into that. So I think that the familiarity with the budget is critical. You'll find a number of people from out of state, though, that may have that focus. They may have a more or less a business background or anything like that. So it really depends on the candidate. And there's a number of people. I believe the recent superintendent that was hired in Palm Beach County used to be in Florida. So there may be people out of
Yeah.
He's in Orange
Yeah.
County.
Right, he was Orange County. So there may be people coming back. I wouldn't wouldn't necessarily restrict.
No, I
it.
don't want to.
Yeah.
I just
right.
wanted to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on, because several people have said
Yeah.
things about Florida experience and Florida's uniqueness.
And that is really, that is true. And it is advantage if you, to hit the ground running when you know that. You may have a little more learning curve, but you know, depending on the person you hire, you can overcome that. The next on phase 5 is developing a plan for receiving the applications and how it will be processed. And one thing that I continually emphasize, and I'm not going to say it too many more times, but the Sunshine Law is critical in Florida. And if I'm involved or FSBA is involved in a search, the Sunshine Law will be followed. I really believe that the applications should come in to the district, and once they hit the district here, they are public record. And anybody in the community and the board can get that. Now, there are some people that say, well, we'll send it up to somebody, a search consultant in Massachusetts, and then at the last minute, they'll turn those in.
Do we lose applicants who will not apply under that condition?
You do in some cases you do. But to be honest with you, I think overall it's better, because if somebody is going to be applying for another job as a superintendent, that person needs to go to the board and tell the board that they are going to be applying. Okay? You know, I was superintendent in St. Lucie County, and I applied for a job in Seminole County. I went ahead and talked to my board members. I had a great relationship with them. It was perfect. But I told them I was applying. You know, I don't think if I would have applied and then they would have found out, they wouldn't have been happy. The type of person that you want is that person that's going to be open and upfront. So I used to think that was a barrier, but it's not necessarily a barrier, I don't believe.
Excuse me for a second.
Go ahead.
Suzanne, didn't when we dealt with Dr. Grego, did the resumes come in here, or did they go to you?
The board at that time made a decision that the resumes would come into my office, and we numbered them and distributed them daily to board members and to Dana's office.
Right.
Selecting who receives them, I think the point that Dr. Vogel made very clearly is as soon as they're received, they're a public record.
Right, no, I wasn't
Regardless of where they
disputing
go.
Right.
I also
Who
want to
holds
say,
them, it makes no
I
difference.
advocate working extremely closely with the school board attorney, because they can go to the school board attorney and they could be processed like that. In fact, that's, and some districts do that. And in fact, the two, if you solicit search firms, I suggested the school board attorney send it out and kind of get those back for the board. So that's actually right. But the key is, and I agree with Mr. Gresta, that they are public record when they hit the ground, and to me that's important. And then what I suggest, and it's just like you did last time, immediately the board gets those applications, and the consultant gets those applications, and then moves forward with looking at them and reviewing them. And if the press wants to come in and get those, we can do that.
And by the way, and that makes sense because the board attorney, first of all, sunshine laws are going to be followed as well, and they respond to the board. They're not staff. That's another layer, so we can control that process as how they come in and how they're being distributed.
Right.
Just wanted to make that point.
And there are different ways of doing that. Some districts have it all internal staff involved. Others will use the school board attorney, depending on what the board wants to, and set those protocols up. Those can be set up any way that the district wants to do it. Next, I think is very important. You have to have someone that can answer questions of the applicants and the board members and the press 24 hours a day. And I have seen searches where an applicant, well, I'm thinking about applying.
I can't even get here on time. You don't mean 24 hours like in one day, it's like over 3 days, right?
Some of you know how I am. I haven't changed how I used to be. You know, I'm just driven on that. But because there's all sorts of things come up. You can lose a good candidate if they pick up the paper and they read something about the district and they say, "Oh, I'm not sure I want to go there," and then they call well, you know, I got to find out. Well, that didn't really happen. You know. So it's so important you do that, and so that protocol is going to be very important, and that's why we put that in there. Also then reference checks. Okay. Then what happens with that is it's a lot with all of the modern technology and Google and everything else like that, the reference checking process is a little bit easier than it was years ago. And that's why I mentioned school board attorney, because I always like to have the school board attorney help weigh in on that process a little bit. So the applicants and the searches that I've been involved in, any of the applicants that have gone to the board have been checked for the finalists. The finalists
Just
have been.
you don't check till you get the finalist, right?
Yeah.
Normally, we don't do that. We do, what happens, we do some preliminary checking on every applicant. If I had, the last search that I was involved in St. Lucie, we did preliminary checking on a lot of the applicants because we didn't want any of the finalists that we brought to have any issues.
When you say check, can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. We do, you can look at newspaper articles, you can make phone calls because they all have references. There's always somebody that knows somebody else. We also, if we have any issues, we weigh in on the superintendent. When you look at the different experience of people, you know, you can kind of read, I have an HR background, you can kind of look at those and figure out, you know, well, I need to check this one further. And so what happens is sometimes, not in any of the searches that I have been involved in, sometimes, and I think the consultant might say, well, I just want you to know that this person left the job up here in Idaho, but there were certain circumstances there, and you know, so everybody knows everything about especially the finalists. When you get to the finalist, everything should be clean. That's why we bring the school board attorney in. There's also new laws that give school districts more access to sealed records. And I'm looking at Mrs. DeGresta. And I would lean on her, Mr. Brown, you know, make sure that, you know, we have a clean list of candidates because, you know, we want the board to know that.
And that's, and to the point Dr. Vogel's making, that's one of the things that I see, you know, is, well, we go to conferences and there's all these breakout seminars, but really part of the value is networking with people from other districts, because while the candidate X and candidate Y may list, you know, no one's gonna list a bad reference. No one's gonna list somebody that you call that's gonna give them a bad reference. So, but you may know somebody in that district that wasn't listed as a reference that you can call, and they, you know, and you don't know what they're gonna say. They might say, oh, this person's great, we hate to lose them, or oh yeah, this person, you know, good luck out. You know, I mean, you don't know what they're gonna say, but that's why it's real, you know, I remember, I mean, I was calling Rotary presidents, Kiwanis Club presidents, all kinds of stuff like that, because just, you don't know who and what and where. But as far as checking, let me ask another question, because this is something that is more of an HR function or an attorney function than a board function, in my opinion. People are gonna list their credentials, their doctorates, their masters, their bachelors, and you know, I'm not gonna start calling universities and asking for transcripts and things like that. At what point in the process does that get verified? When we decide they're one of the 10 finalists, one of the 5 finalists? When does that come in?
What I suggest on this, I think that's a very good question. It's very important that the person who applies for a superintendent job fill out the district application. Because the district application has certain questions.
Initially in the first
Yes,
application?
yes.
Okay.
There's district application has certain questions that I'm sure have been vetted by the attorneys in the HR department. And I've seen it happen that the superintendents have not filled out that application, and then issues may come up. So whatever the process is used to screen anyone else would be the same one that would be used here. And normally what happens is, depending on, and that's why you have a luxury of time. When we require transcripts, it takes time sometimes to get official transcripts in. So if you have a short window on it, you end up getting a number of applications in that are incomplete. And so what do you do with those applications? It's better if you go ahead and have more time. Another strategy that we've used, and I don't think you may not need it here because you're in a position where you will be one of the only districts going out for a superintendent if you, we'll talk about a timeline working backwards later. But what happens is, if there is a number of searches going on and people are applying for a number of districts, as Mr. Wheeler said, the last time you had someone drop out because they, and what we've done on some searches is say that we put a deadline and we've added or until filled. So if there were top candidates that were in other searches that were eliminated, we could add people. And that has worked out. We've never had any flack on that. It was a strategy that was very successfully used. And that might be something we suggest too. The whole thing about this process is it has to be custom designed to what the board wants to have happen. And we can cost it out if through FSBA or any other firm. So if somebody, it depends on what you want. And you can't say, we did this in this district, we're going to do it here. Because I've already heard just general input from the board saying we want to do this or I want to do that. So that's why I urge you, whoever you decide to use, before they come in here and say, well, this is what it's going to cost us, let's see what package you want to have. Okay, so we've got the reference checks, and then I think it's very important to determine the process for selecting candidates to be screened. Do you want to use a citizens committee? I'm hearing probably you don't want to do that. I think probably the best way to do it is to have the consultant, after I know exactly what, or I say I, but whoever is doing it, the consultant needs to know exactly the type of candidates the board wants. Okay, and then looks through all the list. The board looks at all the candidates, they know exactly what they want to, and then the board and the consultant sit down and say, okay, we want to interview the top 5, we want to have a couple options right here. Let's sit down in a meeting like this, and we'll just go around and we'll say, okay, what about this person? Well, yeah, I'd like to talk to him. Is there a majority of the board that wants to talk to him? Yes. Consultant recommends it? Yes. Okay, that person we're going to interview.
I'm actually in favor of some sort of citizen input on that. I know you said you heard that you weren't. Maybe somebody else said that, but I'm in favor of that if we all agree. So
Yeah, I think you use your own words. I'm in favor of it too, but it depends on what the framework.
yes, and I know that, and that's why we're here.
I'm 50-50.
Yes,
We're here learning. We got to do some thinking.
You would love the framework that we used in St. Lucie
St.
County.
Lucie.
And talk with the board members. FSBA is next week. We did a round robin. We had 2 candidates in per day, and we can actually do 3 a day. And they interviewed all these groups. We gathered the information. It was very, very successful.
My next question is, how does this? Are they coming here and it's open and there's cameras, or
Okay.
That's something I didn't know.
What we did in that particular case is a candidate. We had 2 candidates a day there. The day was they would come in, and one candidate and their family would go with a staff person out and they'd tour the community, while the other candidate was interviewing with professional organization people. Okay, then the other candidate would be interviewing with the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then they would go to a meeting with the interview with the board. Now here's another option the board has. The board can interview the candidates individually and as a board. I strongly recommend the board members individually interview the candidates. Now, some districts don't want to do that. And it was interesting. St. Lucie said, well, we just want to interview it all as a board. We didn't need the personal interview. My recommendation is that you have an individual interview with each of them too, and that's fine with the Sunshine. And then,
I would want to do that.
yeah,
I would want to do both.
Well, we did.
do both. Do both.
I would
do
do
both.
What we did in
Do both.
2008,
So I wanna know.
is
Yeah.
each board member, there was a scheduled time to meet individually, and it was like a round robin thing. But what I specifically did with each one of the finalists, I made it a point, one-on-one, to take each one out either for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and meet somewhere else where it was a relaxed setting and you can sit and talk. And I found that to be invaluable.
Because when it's all 5 of us, it's going to be right here.
Right.
Well, not only that, you can ask them
Yeah.
a question. If you talk to Suzanne and she tells me something that I think is very important, and we're all together, I can ask the question and bring that out if I know that.
The other advantage, and then what happened is, and this worked out so well in St. Lucie, that everybody filled out, that if I was in there and I would fill out a form, and here's the strengths of the candidate, the challenges, and then you don't have to put your name down, you can. We collected it all, and then every board member had teacher association feedback, and then we had every candidate, And so the board had all this input from everybody, and then it gave the board more information to make the decision. And the other thing, the advantage of having the candidates come in, some districts say, we're going to have one candidate this week and one next week, and if you have them all within 2 or 3 days, then there might be some, oh, you know, I asked this person this, I forgot that question. It really helps. And a good firm will bring in, we have files of questions to ask, and you can ask your own too. So we could structure that to make a very nice situation where you would have some community input.
So now, but when that, sorry, Kelvin, but when that happens, is it in this room,
Okay.
public,
Yeah,
or
here's what
as that
happens.
happens, is it a private
Okay.
setting?
We had, the board would meet in the boardroom for their group interview. The citizens group would meet in another conference room, and then the teacher association might be somewhere else, the administrators, or whatever groups you want to interview. And what's really important then is the consultant needs to be in these meetings to facilitate it. So in St. Lucie, we had a team of 4 of us, because we had ongoing meetings at all times. One of us was at every single meeting, except the one where the board members, they didn't meet individually, but if they would have, the board member would have met individually with them. We gathered all the information, make sure everything was legal with the sunshine law and everything like that, there weren't any improper questions, turned all the information over to the board. So the board members are up there, and they have input from community, they have input from teacher association, they had input from the administrative leadership team or whoever they had. And then they have all this data, they look at that, the board members have interviewed as a group, and they didn't want to interview individually, but if they wanted to, they would have that, and then they were able to make their decisions.
Just some comments I want to make. Yeah, Dr. Vogel, when I made my comments about phase 3 is because I can see already it doesn't take a lot of analysis to see the pros and cons of either approach. It'll probably I'm right along with Mr. Tackert's observation that at this point, we just have to see where it's going to lie and how much involvement do we bring and how much do we need, and it'll be useful for the process in the community, whether it's by whatever flavor that's going to take. So I think that's something that's just going to take a little bit of work. As far as the interviewing process, I can already see how this can really go from a snowflake to a snowball, then to a very giant one if we go down the slope. And at some point, it can be more problematic. It could actually be a barrier. So, has it ever been done? And I guess it's a question that the individual interview seems to be essential. At least I feel that already. That's going to.
I recommend that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
The individual one. Can these be done with, and transcribed? That's the first question, because I don't understand what the privacy issues would be, because they're individual board members, not necessarily sunshine there. But I certainly wouldn't mind when I interview a candidate that the board gets a transcript of that. Would that be a problem?
No, that's not a problem. Just to directly answer your question, a candidate and an individual school board member in a room somewhere can have an interview that is not a public interview. That's
Correct.
perfectly
But
appropriate.
but is that a privilege that the interviewee, that the candidate holds?
Well, you would make it a condition of your search. You would just clearly put it out there that this is our process. One of the components will be an individual interview with an individual school board member, and it will be recorded. Eventually, that recording will become a public record, be transcribed or however you wish, posted somewhere. That's certainly fine. I would just suggest making it a part of your process so that it's clear and open. If you would like to be involved here, this is our process that we're going to be following.
One thing I've heard, and FSBA is next week, the one thing I've heard from board members is, I wish I had more time with the candidate individually. And again, it certainly is I wouldn't recommend that one board member transcribes and everyone else doesn't.
I like the relaxed atmosphere
Yeah,
of an individual person.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, we're going to get to the technical criteria, I think, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
It's going to be finding the person that fits.
Kelvin, if you do that, if you have an individual meeting with a candidate.
Bring it up at
And you have, and something happens, then or you have something you want to bring forward, wouldn't you do that then in the big interview?
Well, the only reason, like I said, I have no experience with this. So
Yeah, sure.
I may be asking questions right now that can easily be discarded, and I'm not afraid of that. Now, I'm a big boy. But here's but I do have experience as an attorney and doing depositions and interviewing quite extensively.
These aren't
So,
depositions, Kelvin.
I understand, but the skills translate. I can get to the truth of the matter. And so here's the thing. A lot of times, I can read a transcript of a previous deposition and my interview would be 5 minutes long. It could be 2 minutes long. You can go ahead and narrow it down. It actually could save a lot of time. That's now whether that translate into this process, something that maybe the attorney, can, not right now, that can be analyzed and looked at. I don't know if it's such a horrible idea even at this point. I don't think Dr. Vogel has ever dealt with this before, based on your reaction.
I have had a situation though, I had a situation where in one district where the individual board members had the individual interviews, but they opened them up to the press, and they invited everybody to come in their individual interview. Now, like I said, not all what was.
But that would serve that would not serve the purpose of what I'm advocating
I know,
here.
actually right.
But I'm looking for a procedure that actually would make it a lot shorter, a lot more, instructive for the board.
I hear what you're saying. But to me, I believe that an interview like that you should be very relaxed. It should be.
They generally are.
Intimate.
Just because it's a
As
transcription
any-
doesn't really change that environment.
That's where I was going to go, is what Jay just said. It's about chemistry as well.
Yeah.
Is that,
Right.
and Melba can attest to this, Bill can as well, is that any superintendent has to be able to work with the personalities on an individual level just as much as on a collective level. And so that informal interview time of just to sit down and just talk to two individuals is a very important time, where all the formalities can still happen with us as a body, but the individual component of that ebb and flow happens more in a personal and individualized.
Just think about the conversations I'm sure we all have with Melba that are really good conversations that would never take place if it was being recorded.
But
Probably.
I mean, getting to know
you
a
just wouldn't do
candidate
it.
on a personal level is very different than having a structured interview. If those things are going to be mixed, then I
Yeah, I
can
guess
see
I'm
that I
looking
can see
at that
the
as
issue.
that is.
Yeah, okay.
Then I
I'm
can see
looking
the
at
issue.
that they're
Okay.
mixed, because that's my
Yeah.
opportunity to
Exactly.
get to know
So
them
what
on
I
a personal level.
so I probably would be doing, I probably wouldn't confound the two.
Might do both.
But
Okay.
I would-
Okay.
Exactly. Getting to know the candidate on a personal level is one thing. That's something that I can share in a group at that point. But to share the structured questions that I may have and their answers, I think that would be useful for the rest of the board to have even before they do it, or so that they can go ahead and say follow through with it.
And I guess
It may
I'm
make
looking
the
at the
process.
individual as
But
my
that was
chance
just
to get to
tonight.
know.
Maybe this is not the time to talk about these ideas.
Well,
Let's move on.
I think this is very good, and see, what'll happen here, after this, I'm just giving you a lot of ideas. You may want to have another session where you actually decide on some of these, say, and I see this board, just a short period of time work with it, you'll be able to come to consensus on what you decide to do. I mean, I don't think that's going to be a big issue. We'll talk it through, and hey, like, we may not get everything we want, but this sounds good. So, I mean, that's it. So, anyway, then we've decided how we get to our final candidates, and then we've done our reference checks, and then I talked a little bit about the interview process, and again, I like the idea of interviewing 2 or 3 candidates during the course of a day in a round-robin fashion, depending on how many other groups you want them to interview, and having that input form, but we can work that out anyway. If you spread it out too far, then you say, I think, I remember what this one said, I'm not sure, and it just seems to work out better. But anyway, that's just a thought there. Interview candidates, any firm will have questions that we can prepare for citizens, for board members. You can have your own questions, but we can have questions for you if you want to use the questions that are provided.
I remember, again, when we went through this exercise in 2008, we developed a set of questions that all the board members developed questions. They funneled them through Mrs. DeGresta, And, because some were duplicates, some board overhead saying, so we made sure there were no duplicates. And then we vetted those questions as a board, and then when we brought the candidates in, candidate A, B, C, D, E, they were all asked in sequence the same questions at the board interview.
Correct. And that's what I would suggest. The other thing that I found has been real helpful, and I think if there's anything I accomplished today, it's the work that you do before you start the search and after the search that are critical. Once you have the workshop and decide what your priorities are, I would suggest as part of the application process, you list 4 questions down or 3 questions and have the candidate answer that question. Say, we are right now working on a partnership with Medical City. We've got we've got a medical focus on academy. We've got, what is your experience with STEM, or anything like that. And then you'll have that'll tie right into what you have. Then you'll have some experience. That's why on the front end, it's so important that the board decides what are their priorities are. So that's something else we can do on that. Then, when a search firm will have the exact process for you at the board meeting, working with the school board attorney on exactly how the final candidate is chosen, and then you select a candidate, and now is the most important part of the whole process. Now, but the contract is not even as big an issue as now what? And I've worked in some school districts. Congratulations, you're superintendent. Now what? Well, okay. The process that I advocate and FSBA advocates, and is an improvement on what we've done in the past, is we will sit down, we'll get the contract terms all worked out, and then we will go ahead and work out a transitional plan for a year. What are the goals that the immediate goals the board wants to go ahead and achieve? What are the long-term goals? We need to revise this strategic plan. Maybe that's the first step. We need to do that. And then we also put in place the evaluation system for the superintendent. Boards always forget, not always forget, sometimes there's not an evaluation system for the superintendent in place. And then the contract says, we've got an evaluation due at the end of the year, and all of a sudden at the last minute, they're wondering, what are we going to evaluate the superintendent on? So what we recommend, and we've done this in districts, is go ahead and have some sessions with the board. And one thing, it's an advantage of FSBA, since I'm representing FSBA, I'm kind of marketing FSBA, a lot of that, cost of that is covered because you're a member of FSBA. A lot of those workshops are handled through that.
Costs that are covered.
Some of that. And the other thing is, the first session that we recommend is the board and the superintendent and board relationship one, who sets the meeting, who puts items on the agenda, and everything like that. I've gone into districts where that hasn't been discussed. And the board had a plan here, and the superintendent had their plan, and no one had pulled that all together. So that's what I'm saying. You can buy a search for any price that you want to pay, but what I'm saying is that's the most important. Taking it from the beginning all the way up through that first year. And that is what works well. That's what I say right there. And again, focusing on everything is conducted within the Sunshine Law, and that is basically a summary.
You must really be worried about us with the Sunshine Law. You've only mentioned that like 85 times.
I try to keep it to 3. I don't know if it's any pressure.
He used to be a superintendent.
He knows your wife's a lawyer.
I've worked with her too, and she's very good. She keep me straight.
Board, just a quick comment. I've
Sure.
intentionally tried to remain quiet to allow Dr. Vogel to move through this, but I want to come back to the community input component and share my thoughts on it. Just from where I sit, and I'm definitely open to dialogue and see what everyone's thinking, is I do think having some community input is important. What I probably would envision, and I mentioned this when I spoke with Dr. Vogel on the phone the other day, is I have no interest in abdicating my responsibility, and none of us do either. And so just as a thought, is creating input sessions whereby members of the public can come in here and speak and share with us what their thoughts are, what their questions might be. We may even create a mechanism whereby people can submit questions to this board. So I'll kind of define this in 2 ways. One is that all the board members come up with questions that they want to ask. We reach out to the business community, ask them, the employee base, we ask them, and then the community at large, we ask them. we create that pool of questions, and that's what we then start to funnel down for what it is we're going to use ultimately for that interview. When it comes to the input session, is I would envision, it's just the thought, is holding maybe 2 or 3, maybe 1. It doesn't know, I don't know, but different sessions in here where anybody from the public is invited to come, and we sit with the sole purpose of listening. And we have a facilitator that comes in and just says, we want to hear from the community about what it is that you think you want for a superintendent. And we may get a mom that comes in and shares what her heart is. We may have a business leader come in and share what his heart is, so on and so forth. And all we're there to do at that point is to listen. And then at that point, we can take the input that we received, the questions that we received, we can funnel all of it down into a final product of how we're going to then exercise our duties. The last thing is on these sessions, and obviously they can be developed, if that's the direction that we decide to go in, they can be developed anyway. I think an important one as well would be, I'd like to hear from the staff. And have a session just for staff to come and just give input. What do you want in a superintendent? What is it that you think that you need? And so that's where I see that there's potentially 2 separate ones, a community one and a staff one. We may decide if that, again, is the direction we go, to break that into one more level, community at large and business community, if that's the case, or whatever. But those are just some of my thoughts on how to work through this. I think community input is important, but what I don't want is a repeat of what we've experienced in the past. And I certainly have no interest, I think to Mr. Soto's point, that's what I've been elected to do, that's what we've been elected to do. I have no interest in handing that responsibility off to any one person or any one group, nor do I necessarily think that we need another layer of quote-unquote bureaucracy whereby there's one nominated or appointed person to be the voice of a collective body. That's what we are. So those are just kind of my thoughts.
I'd like to see the St. Lucie model before I commit to anything.
Yeah, I agree. I do as well, and I should have said that at the beginning because I want to see it. But
Yeah, I think, and I think that's a good point, and that way is another good way to do it. There's not any right way or wrong way, it's just the way that the board wants to. And that's what I'm saying. Anybody that tries to give you a canned program, it's not what I recommend. Let me just talk a little bit about timeline.
Is there any public comment?
Before you go into the guideline.
Timeline.
Have some at the end,
Timeline,
maybe.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Let-
we'll wait until the end.
Let me,
Because I was on board when
Sure.
I just.
I'll come to you at the end,
I
Dan.
don't want to say anything bad, I just want.
I think what I heard from the
You're
chair,
fine.
what I heard from the chairman, it makes a lot of sense. And it addresses a lot of issue. I have to, I'm extremely curious to look at what St. Lucie did. However, I agree that we need to go ahead, and I'm just afraid that the St. Lucie model, but I haven't been able to evaluate it, but I will be looking at it in the sense as to whether we get that broad input that Mr. Weishire is looking for, that I'm looking for. And again, we could have these sessions in different parts of the county. I really would like for that working parent to be able to take that time and have that opportunity to be able to go ahead and get that information to us. And so that's very important. And I agree, I didn't think about this, but that's a very strong point. I wanted to reemphasize it to the board, that we will have the superintendent interview, but the interview that we have with the staff could give us other information that would be very vital to this process for us. And so I definitely would like to see that happen.
Staff, but when you say staff, I'd like it to be staff and teachers. Any
Right.
teacher that will, yeah.
Exactly.
All of them.
7,300.
Okay.
It could be different.
Now
It
that
could
they
bring
come as part of the
information that
community, but I
could
think that's a good
supplement.
idea
No,
to
yeah,
have their
I
own
do.
Absolutely.
own session on what they
Deborah
do.
Hawley is the lady in St. Lucie County, the board member. It's Hawley, if you want to talk with her. Let me talk about the timeline. One example that I'll give you, I think it's very important that you proceed very strategically. And Ms. Luciano's contract is through June 30th. And there have been situations when the new superintendent is handed the keys at 12:01 a.m. on July 1 from the old superintendent. But the timeline, if you do your preliminary work in July, right now you're going to have to digest all this, and you're going to, you go to FSBA if you're there and talk with people and everything, get your ideas on what we talked about. In July, maybe look at exit interview, start nailing down the process in August, and trying to finish the process, working backwards from with a new person identified in March. If you're able to identify a person in March, that will give time for the new superintendent and Ms. Luciano to have a very smooth transition. In March, you've got the new person there when you start the budget process, the staffing process, the board priorities for the next year and everything like that. So what I'm saying is, this is an opportunity that few boards in the state have, because you have the luxury of time. There's a board right now, I know Brevard wants to get a new superintendent in. They just were notified a few weeks ago that their superintendent was leaving, going to Texas. We've got to get this thing done by July 1. You know, you have the luxury of doing this in an exemplary way.
Thank you.
I
I agree.
want to add something to that. I agree that we've got the quote luxury of time, but meanwhile, to your point, Dr. Vogel, you've also got, you got to look at this as from a competitive environment. That while in Florida we know the landscape relatively well, but on a national level, and Ricky, I got your point also that Florida's unique, but there are great candidates all over this country.
Yeah,
and there's
that's
going to
what
be
I believe
there's going to be
as well.
school districts all over this country of all sizes who are going to be, if they're not currently, in the next 60 to 90 days, maybe looking for a superintendent. And while we do want to take our time, we want to do this right, we want to be methodical, we also have to realize that from a competitive perspective, you know, if we're going to do it, we also want to do it as efficiently as we can as well. We don't want to, I disagree that we necessarily want to go through till March, because there's going to be candidates going to say, I'm not going to go through a 7-month process or, you know, or a 5-month or 6-month process. I mean, you know, 'cause I think that we did, Blaine Hughes, I think, announced his retirement in April. I think we had Dr. Grego hired by, Suzanne, was it by July 1 or August 1? When did we get him, when did he start, July 1?
It was after that.
August 1?
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be August.
Okay, so the point is, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we rush,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I don't, you know, and we want to do things right, but we have to realize we are competing for talent.
Yeah.
And we want the right person. We don't want to lose the right person because they're getting an offer from someone else because we took 6-7 months.
But Jay, won't the 5 of us, our ability to work together and go through the process will end up be determined by how we work together, what our schedules are, when we come together. And then when we
Absolutely.
do each step, it may be January, it may be May. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right, I understand.
Like,
No,
it's
I don't
going to be
think-
our ability
I don't
to
think we wanna
determine that. I don't
tie
want to
ourselves
push
to-
anything, and
I don't think we want to tie ourselves to a drop dead date. I think we need to realize,
No, I don't
though,
want to.
as we are doing this, we are competing for talent. That's what it comes
No, I
down to.
understand.
Dr. Vogel, to the extent that this process may impede in some way national candidates, I would agree with Mr. Wheeler. We want this to be as inclusive as possible. I agree with your previous statements when you began your presentation. I think that this is a very coveted position, one that would offer any candidate, any future superintendent, an excellent opportunity for growth. Superintendent is leaving. I mean, we're in a transition phase for some great things to happen, and I think that there's going to be, like Jay Wheeler has said, that it's going to draw a lot of interest from candidates that probably would not have looked at another county, or that you have not even seen yet. And we want those candidates. We're really looking for someone who is going to be transformative.
Well, one thing I look on that is it's going to take several months. Let's say you identify a sitting superintendent. It's going to take several months for that person to transition and leave their position. Because, for example, when I was selected in St. Lucie here a number of years ago when I was deputy, I mean, I gave them 4 months. I mean, I wasn't going to leave here in a week, you know, so that's what I'm saying. So even if you identify a person earlier than March, it may take a period of time for them to transition. In fact, I wouldn't, you know, when I'm hiring people, I say, if we want you to come, you know, in an orderly fashion. We don't want to put the other board in a bind either. So just think of that, depending on who you hire, if you hire a sitting superintendent.
Just pile on to Jay's comment. This is in of itself a bit of a disruptive process. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think, and I'm not, when I say the sooner the better in making the decision. I don't think it's necessarily the sooner the better the day they start. But you got 7,300 employees that are sitting there now going, I wonder what's gonna happen, you know.
Sure.
What it's gonna look like. So if we do identify somebody, you know, early in the part of the year, you make the decision, and it takes them 2-3 months to transition out, gives them a month or two to overlap with Mel. I think those are all good things. But once, you know, once we say it's this person, you'll hear a little bit of a sigh of relief, one way or the other. At least they'll know, everybody will be Googling.
Sure, that's right.
Immediately.
Yeah.
So-
Just
Good point.
my concept is, and I think you guys know, I said it the other night, is, you know, I'd rather take our time and do it right than rush into it, but I still respect
Absolutely.
that we need to do it with a degree of swiftness, right?
Yes.
Efficiency. Just kind of thinking about the horizon and timeline that we have to work with, and I completely agree with Bill that we have a luxury at this point to have a
Yes.
superintendent that's not leaving us tomorrow.
Great, that's a
And
great
so,
thing.
just to kind of lay out what, and again, dates could be shifted, but using the summer months to do all this formulation and everything that we're
Certainly.
talking about. Using the fall months to go through the interview and selection process and weeding down, with the hope and anticipation that as we get into the beginning of the year, that, or right before, right in that time window, December, January, whatever it may be, we're making our selection and we're working in that onboarding process. I have no problem conceptually with the idea of the person starting in February and finishing out the last 3 or 4 months with Melba, so that there is that smooth transition and side by
I'm
side.
with
Yeah.
you.
To me, that's the best way that we can do it, and then Melba has an opportunity to help, introduce that person. This board has an opportunity, and as that June 30th date approaches, nobody's shocked. There isn't a keys overnight type of situation. Everybody is assimilated to the new environment and process. I think that may be the right timeline from my perspective. If anything happens sooner, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I just don't want to try
This
to.
process will determine all those,
Exactly,
answer
yeah.
all
The
those questions.
applicants will
Yeah.
determine it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the efficiency of our schedules, when we can get together, how we put together this community input stuff will determine that, how many of them we do, how frequently we do them, all of those will be those variables.
And if I can help as an individual or through FSBA or in any way, I certainly would do anything that I can to help this board and support the board.
I got a
Bill,
question for you.
thank you.
I got a question for you, Bill. We didn't really get into it. I know that, just talking with other board members throughout the state, Palm Beach County, Brevard County, et cetera, I know what they were paying or, fees for their search. And I know that we didn't get into specifics with FSBA review, and I had a conversation on the phone with Dr. Blanton. Any idea, if we engage FSBA, what we're looking at from a range? And I know that there's a menu to pick from, so to speak, but, the menu starts at 5, 7, 10,000, could go up to 15, 10, 20, so it just gives us some sort of a ballpark to work with, and I know that these are tailor-made, they're not cookie cutter, that's why I'm asking for a range.
I would say probably, I would say you probably want to look at 25,000 to do, but it would be, and lower than that, based on how the preliminary workshops that you'd like to have can be used through your dues. And I don't want, I'd rather be on a little bit on the high side
Right.
than low side. I think
have
that
another meeting.
most of the other firms are in 35, you'd probably check that too. So I'd say, I'd probably say 25 plus at the high end, plus some copy expenses and other expenses.
Right.
One thing that has not occurred in recent years is that board members have not traveled to other communities to visit. Once finalists have been advertised, and that runs into, they haven't really had to do that.
I have a question,
Sure.
and Jay just hit on some of it. Can you name for me what districts in Florida have just gone through or going through the
Yes.
superintendent search process? And I think as we go next week to Tampa, it'll kind of key us in on some people to speak with.
I sure will. Okay. I'll start with Volusia County. Volusia hired an interim superintendent on a one-year agreement. Brevard, right now, used Ray and Associates. They did not go through any process except they just hired Ray and Associates directly. They made a selection. They're down to their final 5 or 6 right now. St. Lucie County used Jim Hughey Associates, and I was part of Jim Hughey Associates, which is a national firm. It's an outstanding firm. It does a lot of searches throughout the country. St. Lucie, we just finished that search. Wayne Gent was hired from Palm Beach, and he starts July 1.
Now, in fairness, Dr. Gent announced he was not going to come back. He didn't want to be renewed in Palm Beach.
Jim Hughey Associates has done the St. Lucie search for 3 superintendents over a period of 20 years. They keep calling Jim Hughey Associates back. Okay, then the next, Palm Beach, they hired Ray and Associates. They just hired an individual,
Dr. Robosa.
Dr. Robosa. And so every school district on the East Coast has been changed. Hillsborough County just hired their deputy superintendent as a interim superintendent for at least a year or 2. Last week, 2 weeks ago, Manatee County did their superintendent resigned, and actually I did a workshop for them, similar in fashion. They had a different situation because their interim because their superintendent left on short notice. They put an interim superintendent in, and then who was not interested in applying for the job, and then the next week, or just last week, hired Dr. Diana Green, who was the deputy, who was the runner-up the first time they did the search, which was interesting. She was so strong, they hired her as the deputy. Dr. Green was also the top runner-up in St. Lucie. So Dr. Green is now superintendent for a year in Manatee County.
She came from St. Lucie?
And she came from Marion County.
Oh, okay.
Actually came from Marion County. She applied for Manatee. She was neck and neck with the superintendent who was hired, Mr. Mills. He got it by a 3-2 vote. So she was hired as a deputy, and now she's the superintendent there. It's going to be very smooth for them. So those are the searches. They didn't do a search.
Correct.
Right. FSBA did the Indian River search, and they hired
Mark Rendell.
Mark Rendell, who is deputy superintendent in St. Lucie County. So there's a lot of movement around there.
Yeah, it looks like that.
Right. And the superintendent, as I think Jay mentioned, the superintendent in Palm Beach had previous Florida experience.
I have a question, because I see you just brought up a question to my mind of a lot of this. It looks like there's a lot of musical chairs going on. Which of these firms really have shown a special ability to go ahead and attract national candidates? Because everything you talked to me about right now, it seems to me as though this is just a lot of musical chairs, kind of a lot of qualified people that stay in the state and just move around where opportunity arises. But one of the things I'm not going to speak for the board. I'm interested in actually seeing what the talent that we can get for this county, not just in Florida, but outside of the state. Because this is a great opportunity. What we've built here as a board, as a staff, with Ms. Luciano, the uniqueness of Osceola County, our growth, our demographics, requires a kind of talent that I believe will need to be found in a national search. And what I've heard right now is that all these firms are really good at finding local candidates and finding positions for them in different, geographical areas, same counties, things like
Let
that.
me just add, before Dr. Vogel, I just want to, the 2 searches I've been involved with, one that did not go so well, one that went very well. Both of those, we used FSBA, and we got national candidates from both of them. We did. We got good national candidates from both of them. Now, again, this wasn't as recent as these, so I just wanted to give you that perspective, which again is not recent, but that's my, so Dr. Vogel.
Yeah. I will tell you that FSBA has the ability to bring in the top national candidates. I can tell you that, and as well as any of the other firms. The firm that I have been recently associated with, Jim Hughey Associates, has a national reputation for bringing in top national candidates. They have connections with the Broad Academy, and so there will not be a problem with bringing national candidates to the table. I think that some of the reasons that some of these people that were hired were board preferences. Mm-hmm. The reason, because some boards are saying we want to focus on somebody with Florida experience. So it really, there's not a problem bringing in national candidates. And I can tell you, in Brevard right now, 3 or 4 of the finalists are national candidates. They're sitting superintendents in other districts.
What county is that?
Brevard.
Other
And
states.
FSBA
From the
is-
states. From
And
the states.
FSBA is leading that?
No, that's Ray and Associates. But
Right.
as Mr. Wheeler said, FSBA, whoever you select, will bring in top national candidates. That's not a problem. If you say that you want top
There's a
national
list right here,
candidates,
so-
then you
I
will
have
have
it
top
covered.
national candidates.
Oh, that's Tim's, sorry.
Yeah.
May I ask?
And board, just so you know, what I handed you is what Dr. Vogel handed to me earlier when he got here. It's a list of the firms that Palm Beach looked at, as well as some others with regard to Volusia as well at the top. So
Yeah,
just so you
ratings.
have what I was given as
I
well.
think, wasn't Stacy supposed to find out some of the things about the cost? She was.
Yeah, she will look into.
Sorry, I looked at you.
No, we're good.
You didn't know what I was
We were
talking
waiting
about.
for Dr. Vogel to come because we
Okay.
knew that he would be able to provide us with a list. However, Dr. Vogel, I don't see the Jim Hugan Association here.
It's on
and
the Volusia.
Pardon me?
It's on the Volusia.
Oh,
I've
it's
got
on
its
the
address
Volusia.
right
Okay,
there,
so
yeah.
I see, so
Right.
there's 2 of them,
Yeah,
okay.
there's 2 of them, right.
So I want direction from the board in regards to all of these companies. Do you want us to pursue cost on all of these companies that are on these sheets of paper?
Let me just, I don't mean to interrupt, but let me say,
No.
the cost is important, but if you need to find out what you want first.
Correct.
And even before you go out, it would be best to have a session to decide, I like this, I don't like this.
Develop the scope.
Right, develop a scope, because then it's gonna be a lot easier, because when you interview these firms, they're gonna say whatever you wanna say, and they'll probably have to give you a range if they do it.
Correct.
And I'm not trying to put that off, all that information is there. Yeah.
But that's why I
Right.
need clarity from this board.
Yeah, so board, here's what I was gonna ask as well is, we need to get back together, have a work session, I can't even come up with a word, but a workshop to vet this out a little bit further, decide how we want to put the structures in place, what we want the scope to look like, and I think from that meeting, we'll have an understanding of where we all sit on how we want this to work. And then at that point, we can give direction to the superintendent and staff on, please go out and identify the firms that then can present to us or submit a portfolio to us that we can review and decide if we want to go with FSBA, Jim Hugh, or some other search firm. That would be my thoughts. Is
Ricky, when
that,
do you get back into town?
is that,
20th.
Clarence, you in agreement on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ricky, you're good?
Yes.
Yeah,
I-
Melvin?
Mr.
I know
Chairman,
Ricky
when
wants
we-
to Look up.
You're good.
It
Yeah,
seems.
yeah. I'm looking at my
Yeah,
calendar.
absolutely. It seems as though we're gonna be doing these workshops, they have to be, we have to follow the rules on setting them and announcing and all that. However, we have to really look for the most flexibility so that scheduling is not an impediment. And to that end, I wanna go ahead, speaking for myself, starting at 7:30, for an hour to have frequent ones that we can all be here without a lot of, conflict in scheduling. And if that means just being a little bit early, before our normal calendars, I'm willing to do that. This is the kind of
Sure.
priority that I think we should put on it.
Well, Ricky's gone until the 20th, so.
Correct.
That is when we're all here, obviously.
How
But
about-
I'm up at 5 every morning, so you tell me when you want to see me.
I've got,
6 o'clock, right there when
right now, the
My
22nd.
hair's done by 6. I'm ready.
this
to go.
rooster's this roosters in
The
the neighborhood I
22nd,
live.
I've
They
got
wake
10
me
a.m.
up at
in
that
downtown
time.
Orlando. The 23rd, I'm wide open right now.
All right, let's look at,
Because that's realistic, that's the first time we've gotten back together is the 22nd and 23rd.
yeah, and I'm actually in the same boat as Ricky. I'm gone the same weeks that he is, it looks like.
What, the sunshine violation, was it?
They're not gone
I think we're
together.
going, we're going in different
It's gonna get
directions.
cloudy.
Tim and I are going
It's
to
okay.
interview
Y'all are going-
superintendents all across the nation without you.
Well, go ahead, just let us know how it turns out
Are
when
you
you
a
get back.
superintendent tour?
Yeah, but it's secret, so don't tell anybody.
I do the afternoon of the 22nd,
secret.
the 23rd is wide open for me right now.
Kelvin with the 22nd. Guys, the 22nd is what we're talking about now.
22nd looks really good for me.
I can do early morning. I can't do anything.
I gotta
from,
be out by
like,
9, I gotta be in downtown Orlando at 10 o'clock that morning.
Yeah, booked from 9 to 3, to be honest with you. So
I
I'd
can
have to
do
do
3, so
early
when do you
or I'd
talking
have to
about
do
early?
late afternoon.
Well, what,
He's
I
got-
mean, we don't have to do it on Monday. Could do
How
it
about
Tuesday or
22nd?
Wednesday.
Tuesday 22nd, I'm wide
Tuesday
open.
mornings never work for me. I have
Tuesday
pre-scheduled
afternoon?
meetings every
Yes.
Tuesday.
So is there a?
It's gonna be longer than a
Is there a
2-hour process
logistical
or
issue
hour
with
and a half
starting
process.
meetings at 7 or 7:30? First of all, there isn't? I didn't think so, because you
I'm
guys
usually
work earlier than
here.
that, I know that.
I'm out on the.
So even on a Monday,
Well, Monday, I gotta be out
Okay.
by 9:30.
So,
7:30 to 9:30.
Yeah, he's
I
gotta
can
be
go
out by
7:30 to
9:30. I
I'm
mean,
okay with 7:30
we've
to
already been
9:30, but
here
I mean, you know, if we run over,
an hour and a half.
Don't
I
run
know.
over.
I know
Yeah, not you.
I will not be here. I will be on a trip, however, it is a TDE that I'm going to Finland on an educational tour to see how other countries do
what they do is
the
they
education.
pay teachers more, that's what they do. They teach
What about the
Okay.
24th? No? The 24th
So,
not good?
24th is wide
Tom
open.
would be here.
24th?
Yeah,
4th
because
is
I
fine.
What time?
I say
Anytime?
7. If we're gonna do it early, let's do it early.
Do it.
Say it again, please.
June 24th, 7 a.m. Yes, ma'am?
That's the same time as the business advisory meeting that morning also.
Yeah, I saw that. That would affect you.
I can.
He can
I
skip that one that day.
Yeah, I can be here for this.
7 a.m.?
And we are going to workshop specifically on,
Superintendent search.
Well, it's specifically.
well, I mean, where are we going in the process?
What, it's-
Selection.
Right,
Selection criteria.
We're gonna work on selection criteria.
we're gonna work on the
Of the
criteria or the
process.
process of how we're gonna do community involvement and all that stuff
Yeah,
too.
what do we,
Yeah, I think process,
Okay.
timeline, the form of what we're going to be utilizing.
meanwhile, we need, are we gonna make a decision about who we're gonna use to help us facilitate that search at that time, or? we
It
need
sounds
more
like to me, we
information?
need to figure out how we're gonna do the search
Yeah.
before we ask anybody to help do the search.
yes,
Is
that's,
that
that's.
what you said?
that's what-
Yeah.
Yep.
May I ask?
7 a.m., right?
May I ask?
It's here?
Yes.
During this process on the 24th, would you need a facilitator such as Dr. Vogel or just on your own?
We can do it on our own.
We can do it
As-
on our own.
If FSBA, because you talked about leveraging our member benefits, if there's an opportunity with FSBA to have you or someone here, then I'm okay with that. If not, then there's absolutely nothing that
I think
we
it's
can accomplish. on our own.
beneficial to me, I'll say for me, to have someone that has experience to say, okay, these are some standard things that people like, and then you're able to adjust them for yourselves and just, instead of just pulling things out of.
Yeah. Or if we start down a path that they've got experience.
And they
it's
say,
very
whoa,
bad.
whoa, wait a minute, that's
Which
not
maybe you
good.
do that.
So
Are
what
you
they'll
up
do
that
is
early?
FSBA should-
Oh, yeah, I'm up early. What I would do is, I would talk to Andrea Messina,
Mhm.
because I work for
Right.
her and Bill Graham.
Yep.
You know, I'm available if,
If they ask you to.
We'll all see, we'll all
I'll
see
reach
Andrew
out
next
to-
week.
I have
And I'll reach out
you'll
to
see her
her.
next week.
To Mr. Booth, to what extent can our board attorney help us on this?
With understanding a process or coming up with options for a process? When you say help with this, what is this?
What this is us coming with the criteria to select the right firm. Obviously, the firm that we choose may be able to either, or not. I mean, for instance, for Dr. Vogel, it's kind of like it won't make a difference maybe, but I don't know. And maybe there's going to be one that it'll help us. Let's suppose that we as a board said, you know what, we really, really, really want to look at national talent. Is there a firm that would be better for that purpose than another one? Or
I think-
we really, really want local talent. Maybe it's a firm that's better. I'm not going to predict as to what this board is going to decide in those terms, but from what I understand is that our focus should be, should guide us as to which of these firms
I think there's two
would do the
parts.
job.
Yeah, there's
One
two
is the firm
parts.
selection.
Yeah.
The other one is to figure out our process of how we want to develop, for lack of a better word, the job description of what we're
But
looking
to your
for.
point, though, I think that the firm selection is integral to helping us develop that to a
Correct.
certain extent, because our experience with that is limited at best.
Yes.
Theirs is much,
Sure.
they've got the depth of knowledge that we don't.
And I think while you're at FSBA, talk to the board members. The reason that, a lot of reasons, some of the boards are saying they want Florida experience. And so Ray and Associates in selecting Palm Beach, maybe that was a consideration of the Palm Beach board. I don't know, because that person did have previous
I
flower
can talk to
experience.
Frank Barbieri.
Right, so there's a good opportunity for you all to network up there and get some ideas
I'll
on
just
this.
text him.
Sounds
right
good.
now.
Board, are we good? So we'll get together on the 24th. We'll figure out how we want to go through this process together. We'll create a clear path, and we'll determine from there how we want to engage what firm to help assist us in the process.
Very
Okay?
well.
Ms. Stevens, I said I'd recognize you before the meeting was over, so I want to
Yes.
provide you a brief opportunity.
I didn't know Bill Vogel was going to be here today when I decided to come. Is this being taped? Can I come up here? I want him to know why he never got the job.
Oh, that's not that's not
It's
important to
not
this
important.
discussion
No,
at all.
that's-
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. If there's something you want to add about how we're going to move forward
Yeah,
with the
all right,
process,
then,
but it has nothing to
other
do with
than
Bill
that,
personally or anything in the past.
The board needs to get somebody they feel comfortable with. And you should let the business community form a citizens committee, and you appoint people, somebody from administration, somebody from the Teachers Association, and one board member that'll be the liaison to, have time to interact and report to the board as well. And some other things, in the community, so that the community can be directly involved. Whichever firm, or however you select somebody, if you do a nationwide search, then you're going to get people from all over the country. And you need to get somebody that will want to make a commitment to Osceola County and has to work with the school board. You got to get somebody that's going to work with the school board, and what you won't have fights. You got to get somebody that you're going to work with, that you're going to get along with,
Sure.
so that things run smoothly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
All right. Melba, anything additional?
No.
Suzanne,
No, sir.
anything?
Thank
you.
Dr. Vogel?
No, except thank you very much for the opportunity to come and sit
Thank you
around
for
the
being
table
here.
with you all. I really enjoyed it.
It's our
Appreciate it.
pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you.
And Board, are you good? Anything additional?
I apologize for being, I don't know why I had 9:15 on my calendar.
You're forgiven.
That's next.
All right, so we'll
Okay,
adjourn at
good.
this time. sir.
Next week,
Yeah.
I'm early.
Are you living in Tallahassee now?
No, ma'am. I'm in still in Seminole County.